already joined. So good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining. So we will give 1 more minute more and then we start. But you are in the right place. You are in the FAIR Education Series workshop from FAIRsFAIR, dedicated to FAIR competences, FAIR data competences in doctoral education programs. So we are quite happy with the results from the first part of this workshop that we have organized yesterday morning. And welcome to join our workshop. The idea was to have this series of 3 workshops in presence, so in face-to-face mode, so something that is not possible now. This workshop should be organized by University of Minho in Portugal, but we are doing it online, which is also a great pleasure, but it's not the same. Okay, so let's start. Good morning. So for sure, more people will join in the coming minutes, but I will already start with some information just to kick off this workshop and also to welcome you. So welcome to the second day of the FAIR Data Competences Doctoral Education Programs workshop. Some housekeeping information or rules. So this event, as you already saw, is being recorded. The recordings will be shared afterwards in the event page. In fact, in the event page, we have already all the presentations from yesterday. So we had a very good day yesterday with great presentations and very good discussion. So presentations are we already made them available in the event page, so we can share also the link here in the chat. This is a Zoom webinar mode, so participants' microphones are off, but we are happy for you, if you want to join, just raise the hand and we will give you permissions to talk. We have 2 moments for that. So after the first part and after the second panel, where we have plenty of time for discussions, and we really want you to share your thoughts, and so we can give you permission to talk. So don't worry about that. All the questions, please put it in the Q&A. I think we can use the chat to share some information. If you want, you can introduce yourself, which is something also interesting. It's the place where we are going to share some links from the presentations, and also the speakers, they can use the chat to share some links that they have presented during their presentation. So the chat is for a kind of parallel conversation, Q&A for questions. You can raise the hand to speak in the right moments. if you want to talk about this workshop in Twitter or on Facebook or other social media channel, please use the FAIRsFAIR hashtag to mention this workshop. It will be great for us to have this parallel conversation in the social media channels. Another invitation is related with the FAIR Data Forum that we have. So FAIRsFAIR have available a FAIR Data Forum to different kinds of conversations around the development of FAIR data in different areas. But because we are organizing a series of 3 workshops in universities and targeting the issues of education programs, curricula, FAIR data, curricular integration. This one, the first one in May, then the second one organized under the umbrella of FAIRsFAIR together between EUA and the University of Amsterdam in September, and then University of Göttingen from Germany in October. We have these 3 workshops, and I think we thought that it was interesting to have a conversation around FAIR data competences in universities, also in the FAIR data forum. So please access the forum. We have already some users connected from yesterday, so feel free to join this forum and contribute. So we want here to share some thoughts, to share some examples, some practices. So we have kind of 3 categories under the discussion of FAIR data competencies in university. So RDM and FAIR data skills in the educational portfolio. So we want to present and to share some use cases. Also some educational practices regarding training programs for researchers and then for professional staff, data stewardship, etc. And good practices on the practical guidance that universities are providing on the application of FAIR data principles. This is the idea. This is just a forum. We hope that we have good contributions. This is important for us in the project as we are preparing also a good practices report, and we for sure will benefit a lot if you can contribute to the forum in order to have this good practices that in use cases that you are sharing in the forum also presented in that report. So the link is already shared in the chat. I hope that you can join the forum. So we have much more participants now. I think it's the right moment to start the workshop, and many thanks for joining this workshop, and it's a great pleasure to have this second day of this workshop. So welcome everyone, and I give the floor to my colleague Bert from that is also part of the FAIRsFAIR team and is from the European University Association.
Yes, thank you, Pedro, and good morning, everyone. I'm Brecht Salen. I'm policy analyst at the European University Association. And indeed, together with the University of Minho, we are organizing yesterday's and today's workshop. And we're not doing it just by ourselves. We're doing it as part of the FAIRsFAIR project, but also, and we're very happy about that, today, especially, we're also organizing this with the support of an EUA membership service, the Council for Doctoral Education. Yesterday we had a great start, I felt, introducing, I think, the importance of why exactly focus on the doctoral level for one of these 3 workshops that we'll be organizing. What is the importance of doctoral education in sort of the future of research data management skills, FAIR competencies in the future. And we immediately already had a couple of speakers talking about very concrete and specific initiatives from different countries in Europe, just introducing what is going on in the field right now. Now, today, we're going to expand on that. Today, we're going to expand on that and perhaps have a slightly different focus. We are going to hear more practices from across Europe that are already being implemented. and we will discuss what we can learn from them. So the lessons learned by some of the speakers that are here to introduce them. But we're also going to focus a little bit more today on sort of sustainable implementation. How these practices, these initiatives, where do they come from? How can they sort of be sustainably embedded at different levels, at the institutional level, at perhaps even national and regional level? We're going to talk a little bit more about that. And the way that we're going to do that today, as you can see here in the agenda, is after my welcome, you're going to hear from Alexander Haskell, who is the head of the EUA Council for Doctoral Education. And what he's going to do first and foremost is, I think, draw upon the expertise and the knowledge of the Council for Doctoral Education, CDE, that they've amassed in I think, more than the last decade. This has been one of the driving forces behind sort of the shape of doctoral schools that we see now across Europe at universities, and they have a lot of experience through that experience in implementing new skills training, new practices at the doctoral level. So we're going to start there, followed by three speakers that we're very happy to have on board today. Katja Feld from the Tampere University in Finland, Helene Andreassen from the Arctic University of Norway and Doc and Hands, another project working on this, and then Frank Oliver Glockner from DataTrain, the University of Bremen Research Alliance in Germany. These will then be sort of three very specific initiatives that we'll go to next, followed by then a Q&A with the audience. So the final reminder, as was mentioned in the housekeeping, we're expecting a lot of questions today via the Q&A function. So at any time you feel like asking questions, you can just put it in the Q&A. We will be looking at that during the presentations. That being said, I think it's time to start with our first presenter, Alexander Haskell. Alexander, welcome, head of EUA Council for Doctoral Education. And as I mentioned, there is a lot to learn from the EUA CDE experience with doctoral schools over more than the last decade at this stage. So I will hand the floor to you.
Well, thank you very much, Brecht, for your kind introduction. And also thank you very much to the project for giving me the opportunity to talk today in this workshop. And of course, we all would like to be in Minho today. I remember I was actually 2 years ago at the opening of the doctoral school, and it's really a great place. So if you haven't been there, please visit this university. And I would like, after we had already yesterday, and certainly also this later on, have a lot of very specific good practices, what colleagues have done in this context. I would like to spend now a couple of minutes to really reflect how actually is the context of doctoral education. Now we are talking about FAIR data competences, and what has been actually the development in the last years. For that, I would like to share my screen, and yes, exactly. And before I'm going to talk more about the topic, I would like to introduce where I'm coming from. My name is Alexander Haskell. I'm head of the EUA CDE. CDE is a membership service of EUA. So having steered by steering committee and represented by 10 European countries, we are actually the largest European doctoral education network, now with over 256 universities. We are working on doctoral education policies, promoting cooperation, but also identifying and monitoring trends in doctoral education on European level, but also outside of Europe. And here the question of data is becoming definitely more and more important. Talking about some activities we have done, we have worked lately on research integrity, topic I will talk later, on open science, on the collaboration between doctoral education, on career development and tracking, on issues like the mental health of early career researchers, but also issues like the societal dimension of doctoral education, including everything related to sustainability. Now, being a historian, I always like to talk about history, but I would like to start with a certain reflection where we are coming from in the doctorates. many of you know, the doctorate is actually the earliest practice in university, the earliest degree in European universities. And at the beginning, it very much started actually as an oral practice. So what you learn doing the doctoral is actually being able to present and to teach. And this image of early modern time dissertation showed very much that it was not about doing research, but much more about explaining arguments in a specific time frame. Now, this has of course changed very much since the 19th century. We see an increasing focus on not only on the research, but here also on the dissertation as the main product of the doctorate, as the main product. I have here two examples, the famous one of Marie Curie, and probably the first dissertation at the University of Berlin, 1802, which is often seen as the beginning of this more modern research-based doctorate. Now, history is going on, and what we have seen in the last 15-20 years, and I have here an image of our colleagues from Eurodoc, which represent the early career researchers in Europe, that an increased view is valorization is given to skills you acquire during the doctorate. Now, the other images are behind, not because they're less important, but it shows it's not replacing, I will talk about this later, what we do, but it's an understanding that the doctorate is also including having increasing number of skills. Now, all of this, and I don't have time to talk about this, but we can after also share some links, is based on this Salzburg process, which is this bottom-up process of European University developing doctoral education. And here are 3 documents I can recommend to you if you want to know more how the idea, how the doctorate in Europe today has been evolving. Now, the Salzburg Principle of 2005, I won't go into each of them, but they show quite well about this idea of research is still and in the center of the research. However, there is a need also to look into issues like supervision and assessment, promoting innovative structure, increasing mobility, and so on. Now, in these principles and also afterwards, we see that the doctorate has led to 2 aims we are dealing in research, in the doctoral research. On one hand, as said, the advancement of knowledge through original research, but at the same time also the understanding doctoral training looks also in employment market, which is not, and it's probably now we would say even it's also looking into societal impact of the doctorate, which is much broader than just the research within the universities. However, the idea is we support, we develop the researchers, we develop and nurture flexibility of thoughts, creativities, and so on. So the aims of the doctoral education is the development of good, excellent research, and at the same time also developing a researcher personality in these regards. Now, what we can see, and now I was in the preparation looking how are these developments connected to FAIR data. And what we can see, the key outcome of the doctorate still remains the doctoral thesis, and the monographs are still a standard in several disciplines, but of course an increased number of cumulative dissertation where you are more focused on articles. However, the other, what we can call this like written traces, like data, notebook, etc., which are also part of the doctoral education process. So what we can see now, there is, and here especially also in the question of research and academic career assessment reforms, an increased tendency to recognize these elements are also relevant outcomes of doctoral education, for instance, the capacity to deal with data. And here we have already a connection to FAIR data. The second point is that the traditional doctorate, which has been quite focused on the relation between supervisor, or in German you would say Doktorvater or Doktormutter, and the supervisee or the candidate has been, the institution itself, the university, have increased to play a bigger role, talking about this later. And this also leads to that other university services, could it be IT, libraries, and so on, are also becoming more relevant for the organization of doctoral education. And this is also a question, what the increased relevance of data in the doctorate means also for these institutions. And the third point is that more and more very key issues in university, like research assessment, integrity, mobility, internationalization, and so on, are increasingly linked with doctoral education. And there is also an understanding when we talk, for instance, about open science, also the doctoral school play a role. And we are just working now on a survey with our members, which we will publish in fall, about what are actually the priorities in doctoral education. And here we see also that, especially also when it comes to fair data policies and so on, doctoral education is increasingly becoming more important. Now, in the second part, I would like to take as an example one area where we can see quite the connection between fair data and research ethics and integrity, doctoral training, and this is research ethics and integrity. Now, why is research ethics and integrity important in the doctorate? Just to be short, of course, doctorate is a key phase in researchers' careers where the base of the future starts. Doctoral candidates are early career researchers, and as such, they need to be trained in deal with the challenges of research ethics and integrity. Misconduct has an effect on researchers' career, dependence, also doctoral candidates of others researchers' work. So, of course, we are sometimes confronted with the fact that if breaches of research integrity happen, it can be a huge risk for a career, then research misconduct, putting the value of the doctorate into question. And also in other areas like digitalization and internationalization, we see that research ethics and integrity is becoming more and more important. Let's also talk about questions like privacy issues or artificial intelligence. Now, how we have a connection between fair data and research ethics and integrity. And here we can say an important work in this area of research ethics integrity is having clear and transparent institutional guidelines. And here, use of data is an important and can be an important aspect. Secondly, universities are increasing their training for researchers in this area. And here we can look for synergies and include fair data in and beyond this training. So also to think where it can be special or not. We can include, or we should include in the training supervisors and provide training also for more senior researchers. And also here we need to discuss how the use of data, which has changed, can be included in that. Also the importance to be aware what developments in the way how research is done has a connection to ethics and integrity issues. And also here we need policies related to data to have in mind. Also the need to have infrastructures is becoming more important. Also for a question of research ethics and integrity, you need to be able to deal with all this challenge. And also research ethics and integrity needs to be addressed when we talk about collaboration with partners within and outside of academia. And here, again, questions of data are relevant. So, and this is the last part when we talk about implementing fair data competences in doctoral education. The first point is universities, as I tried to show, have installed through doctoral schools infrastructure to serve as a connection between different services of universities and supervisors and doctoral candidates. And the training and supporting doctoral candidates in developing a wide array of skills are key areas now of doctoral schools activities, as we have also seen today. And so there are opportunities in all of this to include and to see how the question of fair data fits in, where we have the synergies and where we need also new activities. At the same time, what we have also seen in our work, open science is seen increasingly as a relevant topic for doctoral candidates. So here again, we can use actually this awareness we see now to look into more also details, including data questions. The other point, which is very important when we think about how do we connect fair data, how do we implement these competencies and this training into doctoral education in Europe, we need to be aware that we have a very, very different or diverse structures, as it was originally also addressed in the Salzburg documents. You will find universities that have institution-wide schools, others are more based on programs and so on. So be aware actually how doctorate is organized at your institution. The second point, we have very diverse legal frameworks. A great part of doctoral training is actually voluntary. So there is not, as in other parts of the world, a curricula as such of doctoral education. However, one exception we see often is research ethics and integrity. So this is seen as something very key and relevant. So here again, be aware actually about the frameworks of doctoral education, how they're working, and also how they are structured, also to adapt what you are developing to the structure and to the legal framework. We should also not forget that we have a wide diversity of doctoral school infrastructure. So some universities you will find 20 people dealing with doctoral education. In others is seen as something people do besides other obligations. So here again, we need to look what can a doctoral school do and where there are also other, let's say, external or internal expertise that need to be taken into account. In this context, it's also the funding structure. So doctoral schools have funding, but it's often also quite limited. So also here, the keyword are often synergies. Another point, what we are doing now these days, as we are very diverse in institutional approaches, mutual learning and exchange of good practices is something we can really rely on and which is very useful. Again, be aware of the structural context of doctoral education, but also be aware of the doctoral candidates are confronted with a multiplicity of demands today. So we need to see what can be done and what can be done by the candidates and where are limits. Be aware of the existing trainings, as I said before, for instance, in research ethics and integrity, in digital skills, and how to connect this with fair data. Do not only think about doctoral candidates, but how can we also include supervisor, or even support supervisor, or train them in these regards. Think about, as universities have now a bigger role, how can we also look which infrastructures can be given to candidates to support them. And the last point, it's important that we look that there is a funding, and this is something we hear very often from our member, for doing all this, especially now as a lot of things are changing. And we need to ensure that all of this is also possible. And to summarize, we have now a significant infrastructure. There is a big understanding about the relevance of issues like digital training, research ethics and integrity. Data is becoming more and more important in the doctorate, and therefore this project and all is done in this regard is a big opportunity to support researchers. And with all that, I would like to thank and looking forward to your feedbacks. And yes, for the end, please, in case of any questions or remark, I'm happy also later on to be here for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alexander. That's a great presentation to start with. It's a great presentation to start with because I really feel that it gives us a full overview, not just of sort of research data, FAIR data, the issues we're usually talking about, sets then in a broader context of the change that we're seeing at the doctoral level. You've mentioned that very clearly the change has gone from, there is the output of the research. There's now more and more focus also on just the researcher, the person to come out of this process. And especially the doctoral schools, which have developed and have become the norm across Europe, as I understand from surveys, as sort of almost a response to managing all of that change and managing how these people, early stage researchers, are trained. We do have a bit of time, as you mentioned, for Q&A from the audience right now. If there's sort of first take questions based on this presentation, I'm not seeing anything right now. But I would have a question, just maybe to follow up. I think you've sort of addressed many of the questions that I would have already in your presentation. But I do maybe want to expand a little bit more on the challenge you hinted at, as all of this could also be seen as, from an institutional perspective, well, it's just more and more that we have to invest in. There's sort of, and I think we all sort of see that sometimes, where it's, okay, well, this is just another thing added on to this, and there are funding and capacity limits. And I want to sort of expand on that a little bit more, especially now that hopefully, fingers crossed, we're sort of slowly moving out of this pandemic and out of this crisis. But we know that in the coming years, from other surveys, that there's a very great likelihood that the funding structure will just become much more limited in the coming years. So in that sort of context, how would you suggest people move forward if they work in an institutional setting where the response to, should we do more about research data, more about FAIR data, where the response is, well, right now is just not a good time to invest in this. Is there anything you could sort of give as an example or suggestions? Well, how do you deal with that?
Yes, no, thanks. This is definitely like the key question we need to ask. So thank you really, Brecht, for this. Yes, absolutely. This is what I meant in my last slide. It's for both. First, for the doctoral candidates who say, well, I mean, my doctorate depends on a dissertation, and my funding is limited for 3 years. And so, please, what are you asking me to do more? So, first of all, be really aware about the needs, and the needs are quite diverse. So it's what we also see. Let's take, for instance, research ethics and integrity. There is a tendency to have some more basic training for everybody. So the need, what it means to plagiate, there is not really a disciplinary difference. So it makes sense to have some foundation and basic to everybody. But of course, there are other questions, which the question of, I don't know, informed consent is in philosophy different than in medicine. So it makes also sense to have more adopted offers. So the first is be really aware why. So saying, well, FAIR data is important, everybody should be aware of this. Yes, but of course, everybody should be aware of AI. Everybody should be aware of dealing with project management, whatever. So everybody needs to be aware of a lot. So identify maybe what do you feel, and here I think we can learn really a lot from your expertise. What kind of FAIR data, and I don't know if somebody of we have workshops, if some of your participants can give here ideas, what everybody in FAIR data should know. And do we need a specific training for that, or is it maybe really to be included somewhere else? Because if you can include it somewhere else, it will be much more easy. Or do we need to say, yes, this is absolutely critical for researchers nowadays, otherwise it's a risk for the career, it's a risk for the research quality, it's a risk for research ethics and integrity. Then you may also be able to argue, and then also to add some training here. But obviously, the fact that a lot is important doesn't make it possible to have everything in, but there, especially as data is becoming more and more important, we have also legal frameworks. Let's talk about privacy issues, the question of IP. This is really key. So be aware what can you include, be aware what may be just for certain people, and what may you need to motivate people maybe to look for themselves, but may not be able to be included into a training.
Thank you. So I'm really sort of hearing that sort of focus on why a specific thing is interesting, is necessary. And I imagine sort of we really think about sort of how it fits within an institutional strategy as a whole. You mentioned doctoral education through the doctoral schools becoming really a part of the institution more and more. That's great to hear all of that. There is one question that came in, but I will let you reply as we go to the next presentations, because it's a question about, is there any material that can be shared from CDE that is publicly available? It's in the Q&A, but I believe that you then in any case had planned to sort of share a couple of publications in the chat. Yeah.
We just give me 30 seconds of promotion. We have also a newsletter. So if you would like to know more about our activities, we just will have an annual online meeting in September. So I will also share the link, and you're all welcome. And CDE, we are not only EU. So for instance, I'm now based in Switzerland. So we, like EUA, we represent really the whole geographical area of Europe and have also therefore the whole European perspective here, but I will share some links in chat, I guess. Yes.
That's perfect. Meanwhile, then I think, Alexander, thank you so much for presenting this, for starting us off. We'll move on now to 3 presentations focused on specific initiatives to adopt FAIR data competences in doctoral education programs. And we have 3 presenters here with us today to give a specific insight in what is already happening at the institutional level, and also today a bit to focus how these initiatives are developed, how they're being integrated within institutions. The first speaker that I'd like to give the floor to is Katja Feld from Tampere University in Finland. Katja, if you're ready, the floor is all yours.
Great, thank you, Brecht. Let's share the slides. So I hope the slides are visible to you at the moment.
Perfect, perfect.
Okay, great, wonderful, thank you. Hello, everybody, and thanks for granting me the opportunity to talk about FAIR data competencies in Tampere University. And to briefly introduce myself, I am Katja Feld, and I work as a senior specialist and a team leader at Tampere University Library in the Open Science Services. And my team is mainly responsible for research support services, so open access publishing and research data management. And today I'm going to talk about how we have been implemented FAIR data and data management competencies in doctoral studies. I'll start very briefly by giving you a little bit of context of what is Tampere University. It's the second largest university in Finland, and we are fairly sort of new university. We're only 2.5 years old, basically, because in the beginning of 2019, there was a merger where 3 universities basically came together. So the former University of Tampere, the Technical University of Tampere, and the Tampere University of Applied Sciences. So we have been doing work, but still at many levels, we are still in the very beginning. And the university is also a multidisciplinary university focusing on technology, health, and society. And we have over 2,000 doctoral researchers, and over 200 doctoral theses are defended yearly. So now you know about Tampere University. It was kind of Tampere University in a nutshell. And what I want to talk about next is FAIR data in our institutional strategy, because we have been implementing FAIR data fairly well, in my opinion, to our strategies. We have 2 main documents on open science. We have Tampere University's Open Science Policy and an Open Science Action Plan. And the policy document is, well, it's a policy document, kind of stating the general policies and general guidelines on open science. And the action plan is more of a concrete to-do document that aims to kind of concretize the guidelines lined in the policy. And I've sort of highlighted a couple of things here from both of these documents, those that kind of focus on FAIR and also on data management and on education. So already in with the policy, we have a very clear message that the researcher in Tampere University have to ensure that the research data be produced is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And also the policy states very clearly that every member of our community is responsible for the implementation of good data management practices. So, and if you move to the action plan, here kind of things become a bit more concrete. But again, we have FAIR from the point that the university will ensure that its processes, information systems, and support, guidelines, and education enable the realization of the FAIR principles. And this is something that we have been working very heavily. And also, in order to make the members of the community aware of their responsibilities and good data management, the topic will be integrated in curricula and taught from the basic studies onwards. So in these two kind of central documents, both FAIR and both sort of responsible and good data management and its importance for everyone in the community comes pretty clear. I also want to point out that we have a kind of a slightly different policy. We also have a data management policy for open research infrastructure. So this is meant for research infrastructures operating within our university. And this policy provides general guidelines and principles for research infrastructures to promote responsible use and open access to their resources. And these guidelines and principles are sort of compiled in order to enable the infrastructures to make their data they produce findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So kind of together with this whole university level policy and action plan, we also have these sort of smaller strategies and policies introducing FAIR as well and highlighting the importance of FAIR. So I want to move to the doctoral studies, and first to kind of highlight that if we talk about doctoral school and doctoral studies in Tampere University, we have the doctoral school that is mainly responsible for providing high quality doctoral education, both in Finnish and in English. And the curriculum complements the university's doctoral programs, of which we have over 20, if I remember correctly. And the doctoral school also is intended to help to identify and develop essential skills that are related to research methodologies, and research ethics. And the courses on data management, we have kind of been implementing courses to the doctoral school. And we also have a very important service or a network also working in Tampere, that's the Research Data Services. As I said, it's a network of people, network of units consisting of library, IT services, research services, records management and legal service team, and the Finnish Social Science Data Archive, and the library is coordinating the services. And the Research Data Services aims at offering tools and training in different sort of phases of the research data lifecycle. So research data management is the thing that we are interested in, what we do, and where we help people. We are also mainly responsible for data management training that is being provided in the university. And also the aim of the service is to support the implementation of FAIR in all phases of a research project. So when we talk about data management in doctoral studies, the doctoral school and the research data services are kind of involved in this. Now I'm going to give you a couple of examples of what we already have. in doctoral school, in terms of data management, they are slightly different. First, we have the Managing Research Information course. That it's a bit broader course. It is intended for doctoral students, clearly, and its aim is to emphasize the processes of systematic information management, and it consists of 4 different modules: information searching, scientific visibility and impact, open access publishing, and research data management. So research data management is one module, and it aims at giving the participant an overview of how to manage their data properly. And the FAIR data principles FAIR principles are introduced there. Of course, they are sort of at the end phase of this course. They are included in chapter chairing and opening data. And the idea is to get the doctoral student aware of these principles, not necessarily yet to apply this in their own doctoral thesis. Then the other course that we have in doctoral school is the Research Data Management Survey and Interview Data. As the title says, it focuses on surveys and interviews. And it is kind of primarily meant to be taken after completing the Managing Research Information course, as it expands a lot of the research data management areas. And FAIR principles are introduced in the opening lecture. The course starts with the opening lecture, both in Finnish and in English, and then the students work independently and in their own pace in Moodle afterwards. Here again, the focus of this course is to kind of get the students aware, the doctoral students, kind of to understand the research data lifecycle, and especially what it means to collect and process an open survey and interview data. We have the FAIR principles again here in section opening research data. And the idea here is to kind of give a broader awareness of where FAIR compared to the Managing Research Information course. And a third course that we also have is the Research Ethics, that is also located in the doctoral school. And this is a mandatory. The other 2 that I was mentioning were voluntary, but this is a mandatory course for all doctoral students. And it's focusing on research ethics, and the organizer is the university lecturer on research ethics. And here, as the course is mainly focusing on research ethics and research integrity, we do have open science included in the lectures. So we have research data management, we have open access publishing, researcher impact and visibility, and data protection. And the data management lecture emphasizes good scientific practice combined with responsible data management. And again, we do talk about FAIR. The FAIR principles are introduced. And what I would like to see in the future, as I am the one who is giving out this lecture, is that how to connect FAIR to good scientific practice and responsible data management in a much sort of in a more tight way and more sort of evident way. So work to be done there as well. And I probably ran out of time because 10 minutes is a bit snug, but I still want to give you this last slide and tell what we are thinking about doing next and what should be done next. So first of all, the data management and FAIR data awareness should be implemented more systematically to studies. So both basic studies and doctoral studies. We are already doing a lot, but that's not quite enough at the moment. And already the path should begin from the basic studies. So the principles of open science are already included in the library's information searching teaching. That is mandatory for all students, but more is needed. Because that is the way to doctoral studies when the basics of data management and FAIR have already been acquired during the basic studies. And especially in data intensive subjects that we have in the university, they definitely need more data management training. And when we think about basic studies, data management is not just a researcher skill, but it's also a working life skill. So for students, it is a relevant skill to have anyway. And also we need to implement more FAIR data and more data management courses in doctoral education, so mainly doctoral school. So we have this one full course, but we need more. Also, an important part of what we are doing is focusing on how to increase data management training and with a focus group of thesis supervisors. So they're a very important group for us at the moment. And this is something that we are already doing. So we are providing data management training specifically for thesis supervisors, but we need to figure out how we can implement this to all the supervisors. Because the challenge with the RDM training is that it is largely voluntary when we talk about doctoral student and researchers and staff members. So that's the challenge. We do also have a national policy on open data and methods with the policy component 1, open access to research data, where FAIR data is emphasized. And on this national policy, the emphasis on the importance of training comes very clear, and especially training supervisors, as well as including data management training in the curricula for basic and further education. So we kind of have these national policies on open science, open data that is backing us up. And also we need to consider how we can increase knowledge about reusing and utilizing FAIR data more. But that's all I had to say at this moment. So thank you very much. I still have a couple of links attached here. But other than that, I'm eager to wait your questions.
Thank you, Katja. Thank you for that presentation. I think it's great to see some very concrete initiatives that you're implementing. But as you mentioned, these are not just isolated initiatives. They do fit within a broader institutional strategy. There's an idea how they fit with everything else. I think that's sort of a really good lesson to be learned there. We are just going to move on to the next presenters and then take questions afterwards. But there is one question I just very quickly wanted to ask you from the Q&A. Is Ellen Leenaerts is asking, these courses, is there the possibility for these to be reused by other universities?
Well, why not? I would say yes, definitely. Of course, I have to probably discuss with the members of the doctoral school with the utilization, but I don't, since we are operating in the realm of open science, so I would not see why should we kind of build any barriers between, you know, exploiting other people's courses.
Perfect. Yeah, I just wanted to quickly ask that question because it's such a sort of specific question.
Yeah.
Katja, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll move on then to Helene Andreassen from the Arctic University of Norway. And as I mentioned at the start, also very important from Doc Enhance, a Horizon 2020 project that focuses specifically on enhancing training and skills at the doctoral level. So very much looking forward to hearing from your side as well. Helene, the floor is all yours.
Thank you. Can you hear me and can you see my slides? I hope.
Perfect.
Yeah, good, thank you. So, as you all know, we are in the midst of a global pandemic. And what we have seen the last year is that we need to share knowledge, to collaborate in order to proceed in finding a solution to the crisis. And this was posted on a Norwegian website last year, where they underlined that the way we should learn from this situation and the way that we are working now should be established as the way of working also in the future. Of course, we don't know what happens in the future, but it seems that the pandemic has really underlined and also awakened the moral responsibility that researchers have in order to produce good and reliable research. And accountability and reliability are two core concepts of research integrity. And next to increased focus on open science, we have also seen an increased focus on research integrity in the last years. And that is in part because of lack of transparency in published research, but also a too high level of questionable research practices. And open science is closely connected to research integrity, and even if it might be implicit that sharing is the right thing to do, the Finnish researcher Heidi Leine underlines that, well, in her view, there is too little focus on the ethical aspects of open science, and the way we read her, she clearly suggests that the connection between open science and research integrity should be a much larger part of the discussion on good research practices. And responsible management of data is part of good research practices, and these need to be acquired during doctoral education. Not only in order to create good quality research during the PhD period, but also management of data. These skills are also relevant for work outside of academia. For instance, protecting information, organizing information, disseminating information. And also when you learn research data management, you also hopefully acquire a broader understanding about the importance of being transparent in your research, well, transparent in what you do, and also that you work in line with the ethical guidelines. And this, of course, is also, it might be important for your development as a human being. At the university where I work at UiT, the Arctic University of Norway, we have been working on research data support services for many, many years. And I think it's 5 years now that we offer each year twice a cross-disciplinary seminar on these topics, research integrity, open science, including research data management for our PhD candidates. We also, since last year, offer an annual faculty-wide seminar on open science for PhD supervisors. And we also have series of introductory and thematic RDM courses for our employees. And we also have this institutional archive for open data, and all these services are developed, guided by the FAIR principles. So when we were asked at UiT to participate in the DocEnhance project, we were very much happy with that. The DocEnhance project is a 3-year project, in part funded by EU, and it involves 19 partners, mostly from around Europe. And this is a picture from the kickoff meeting that was just before the world closed down. The main objective of the DocEnhance project is to enhance the transferable skills intelligence and their integration into existing PhD programs. And one way of doing that is by developing a curriculum, an employment and innovation-oriented curriculum for PhD programs. One key deliverable of the project is the development of 3 pilot courses, and these will be published for reuse on the DocEnhance platform after the end of the project. And one of these 3 pilot courses is the Data Stewardship course. The Data Stewardship course, it covers all the phases of the research data management lifecycle, and it also includes discussions about the very purpose of the research data management, and also the concept of data. So we have very much based the content of this course on what we have been teaching previously here at UiT. So it's developed by a group of RDM specialists at UiT, and it's basically the same group as those that are involved in our teaching. But we have been 3 persons that in particular have been working on the DocEnhance course, and that is me, Henning Hansen, and Leif Longwa. All the DocEnhance pilot courses are split into 3 different parts. The first module is focusing on open education. So we create online open courses that is available to everyone at any time. And the second module is focusing on interdisciplinarity, where students are supposed to work more together. And the third module is called mobility, where PhD candidates are expected to work together with people from outside of academia. So if we go a bit more into detail about the 3 different modules in the Data Stewardship course, the purpose of module 1, which was the online course, The purpose of this part is to learn basic RDM. As you know, PhD candidates come with different levels of knowledge, different experiences, different perspectives, and they all should have at least a basic level of RDM knowledge. The course is put on the Moodle platform, and it contains 10 different topics and suggested readings for each of these topics. We focus on motivation. Again, why is it important to care about research data management? We focus on theory and different concepts, and we also try to interact with the students by having a lot of quizzes and also open food for thought assignments where students can really, how can I say it, they can relate relate the topic to their own situation, to their own project, to their own discipline, to their own institution. So really to see the relevance of what they're learning. When it comes to the content and the level of detail in this module, it was subject to a lot of discussion, but we have based it on what we know about research data management and also, of course, our own teaching experience, especially with the PhD candidates in mind. Turning to the module 2, here the purpose is to employ the research data management skills and knowledge in a more collaborative setting. So here the students meet either in person or on Zoom, and where they work on assignments, data from different disciplines, perhaps different types of data. And the aim is that they should apply their knowledge that they have acquired during working with module 1. So we have created again on the Moodle platform, a lot of teaching material. This is mostly aimed at the teacher. And we offer 6 3-hour-long thematic sessions, for instance, on data management plans, on structuring data, on citing data, different types of topics. And the goal is that these seminars should be student-led. So we have created a lot of pre-assignments, group assignments, also smaller group assignments. So really that the students are expected to work and by that perhaps learn better. So we offer quite a lot of material, but it's the local teachers who decide which content they want to use, which activities they want to use, all given the actual participant group and also perhaps time constraints. And if they find that other examples should be used instead of what we offer, that is of course entirely up to them. We just provide a frame with some suggestions. Turning to module 3, which is called mobility, here the purpose is that the PhDs should employ their RDM knowledge in cooperation with the non-academic sector. And again, it's about using what you have learned through module 1 and 2 and apply these knowledge in meeting with someone outside of academia. And again, on the Moodle platform, we have created some teacher material. It contains advice from the non-academic sector about how teachers should proceed in order to get the local non-academic sector engaged in the Doc Enhance course. We offer some assignment ideas, and also we hope to establish a community-driven resource bank, because the content of this final module, it very much depends on the local stakeholders that are involved. So we expect to see quite different types of module, different types of, how can I say, teaching sessions when it comes to module 3. And we would like to see some ideas from different teachers that perhaps other teachers again can use when they plan to run module 3 in their university. So once that the data stewardship course is out, it may of course be freely used by anyone, and it's supposed to be licensed CC BY so that it also can be built on. It's the local university that decides whether the PhD candidates should receive credits for taking the course, but we have laid the ground for it by having for each module 1 assignment that is suitable as an examination assignment. So together, these 3 assignments may function as examination for the Doc Enhanced course. And this is the certificate that you receive after passing the exam in module 1. Yeah. So just to round up the calendar, now we are in the midst of testing the pilot course at 2 partner universities, Karlstad University in Sweden and the University of Chemistry and Technology in Prague. So they are testing it, they are evaluating it, and then it's up to us and to do the revisions in the fall. And then we're going to do another round of testing, evaluation and revision. And the plan is that the entirety will be released by the end of 2022. So then I hope that many of you will come visit the course and perhaps use it at your university. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation, Helene. And that's a great invitation to end with. I think it's a great presentation showing sort of very concrete initiatives to be picked up on, but also the broader context behind it and where it's coming from, which I think is very important. I see that there are sort of questions coming in. If people attending have more questions for Helene, please put them in the Q&A. We'll address them during the big Q&A session afterwards. And for now, we'll move on to the final presentation of the day. We're moving ahead very quickly. And this is a duo presentation by Frank Olivier Glockner and Tanja Örner from DataTrain, which is part of the University of Bremen Research Alliance. Frank, Tanja, the floor is all yours.
So thanks a lot. I will just share my screen. Give me a second. So now you should see it. Oh, hopefully. So Tanja is already nodding. Let me start with the first slide here. So thanks a lot for having the opportunity. And as already mentioned, we are doing a dual talk, a tandem talk between, Tanja and me. And I will give you a bit of a motivation why we have started the DataTrain project or DataTrain education system in Bremen as part of our, let's say, cross-disciplinary training program that is, we think, very, very important at this time. And I heard from the other talks, I think we agree on this, I would say. Just a brief outline. So as I said, I will give you some minutes of motivation because 10 minutes in total is not that much. And then we switch to Tanja, give you more details about the program itself and the development phase and the current concept and curriculum and also the first success stories, definitely. And I think we heard already a couple of motivations, and I just give you some pictures that motivated us very much. And I think we heard it from other talks. Definitely now, every PhD student, every postdoc, if he's just applying for a research grant, if he wants to publish a paper, he's been confronted with this buzzword bingo. Everybody's asking for open research data, fair data. So there must be a basic knowledge about this. You cannot cope with this in the current situation, I guess, without having at least a slight idea about this. This was definitely one of the motivations. I give you another one, economy. And it's a new project, FAIRsFAIR, and for sure, there's a lot of money in the value chain, the data value chain, data as a business. I think you see it everywhere. Just look at the hyperscalers, Amazon, Google, they are dealing with the data. And definitely the point is here that we need, everybody at the end needs a certain amount of knowledge about data management, about data science, and to cope with this 10 million new jobs that is available, well, not new ones, but the 10 million jobs available, and to contribute to this. So this was also for us a strong motivation to get into this business and really set it up. Another point, and this is more or less the scientific point. So that's my favorite here, because it's unfortunately not me here, it's from an old film, but moving through this data space, this ocean of data and then combining things in a flexible way to gain new information and knowledge. So that was somehow my dream 10 years, 20 years ago. And then I touched the reality, and I guess everyone knows if you try to get data from others, then you often crash into this typical file not found error, whatever it is. because still we don't have these kind of research data management in place as it should be and as we would dream of. And just to give you a bit more scientific background on this, also people have thought about what has happened to the data over time. And let's say a disaster in this case, if you look even at published publications, publications and try to retrieve the data after 10 years or 20 years, you will end up with only 10 or 20% of the data that is available still. And this, I guess we all know, is the reality, and we should have a better view in the future on that and help the next generation to cope with this. Another point also, this is now more a local or not local, a German motivation, because this has been regarded, research data management has been regarded as one of the key factors for Germany. And we are currently building up the national research data infrastructure called NFDI, where we put from different domains the knowledge together to generate something via systematically index of interconnected data. It has just started as a 10-year perspective at the moment, and then maybe for the future. And this is also for us definitely important. And also in this respect, as mentioned before, we need people with the right skills, data literacy, data management, data science. We always think this together, critical thinking, innovative technologies, because this, data is a business and science shouldn't be lagging behind in this case. So now I move directly to Tanja, and Tanja, your turn.
Many thanks, Frank Oliver. So I'm Tanja, I'm the data train coordinator, and I will continue now with an introduction of Data Train. It's a training program in research data management and data science, because we think that these are two highly significant competences in relation to FAIR data that simply belong together, as both are part of the data value chain. Or in other words, and this is also shown in this figure here on the right-hand side, research data management and FAIR data make up the fundament for data science applications that in the end draw the insights from the data. And our target group are doctoral researchers. On the next slide, you can see that Data Train is a joint initiative of the EU Bremen Research Alliance and the Federal State of Bremen that started in December 2019, and that is funded for 4 years. And for those of you who do not know the EU Bremen Research Alliance, this is a cooperation network between the University of Bremen and 12 non-university research institutions that are all located in Bremen, so the Federal State of Bremen, the northern part of Germany. And the next slide shows you that the Data Train program is linked with the funded NFDI consortia in which member institutions of the EU Bremen Research Alliance are involved, namely NFDI for Inc. This is a consortium for the engineering community, NFDI for health, so a consortium for health data. Then Consort SVD, this is a consortium for social, educational, behavioral, and economic data. And NFDI for biodiversity, a consortium for environmental and ecology data. And these NFDI consortia contribute to the Data Train program, so to our development phase and also to our curriculum. And we share our concept with these NFDI consortia so that such a training program could be established at other locations. And we also collaborate closely with the Data Science Center of the University of Bremen. For example, they offer us their technical infrastructure for our training purposes. And on the next slide, I would like to show you now the single steps of our development phase. And this is really in short now. So we started with an internal and external research. Then we conducted a status quo demand assessment in the EU Bremen Research Alliance by means of interviews and an online survey. So we interviewed more than 70 people in the EU Bremen Research Alliance, and these were mainly senior scientists, but we also talked to coordinators of graduate programs, to PhD students, and to infrastructure personnel. And based on this assessment and the research, we developed our concept and a preliminary curriculum, which is tested in our pilot phase, in which we are now. we started with the first cross-disciplinary seminar for bachelor and master students in the winter term 2021. And once this was completed, then we continued with the first run of our curriculum for doctoral researchers and started with this in March of this year. And this pilot phase is accompanied by an evaluation process. So we evaluate each lecture, and we think this is really important for this pilot phase because we really can enhance the quality of the program based on this feedback. We can do topic tuning, and we can also rethink our strategy. And the next slide shows you now the concept of data train, and we start here with its main features. So data train is a voluntary training program for doctoral researchers of the member institutions of the Bremen Research Alliance. It is central and interdisciplinary, and this optimizes resources and fosters networking across disciplines. And we think that this is really beneficial for the doctoral researchers to do that at this early career stage. And we focus on cross-discipline basics in research data management and data science. And we know there are discipline-specific qualifications that are really important and that need to be trained, but this should be done in addition to the basics trained by data train. And these discipline-specific qualifications should be trained, for example, by the scientific fields or by the NFDI consortia. And the last point here, our curriculum should be flexible, as research data management and data science are highly dynamic topics that develop rapidly. And we would like to offer our doctoral researchers so-called course picking so that they can really choose the courses they need at that moment. And on the next slide, you can see that we also aim to consider requirements that are specific for our target group, like their limited time resources, the diverse thematic foci they have, and also the different level of prior knowledge the doctoral researchers have. And on the next slide, I would like to show you now how we implemented these requirements in our curriculum, so in the concept of our curriculum. So firstly, we classified our lectures or the lectures according to the level of prior knowledge into a starter track. This is level 1, and these are interactive overview lectures, and into an operator track. And level 2, the apply level. So this operator track consists of hands-on workshops. And secondly, we separated this operator track by topic into a data steward and into a data scientist track. And all these 3 tracks are shown in this figure here on the left-hand side. So we always start with the starter track. Once this is completed, we continue with the data steward, and afterwards we go on with the data scientist track. And although each track follow a thematic structure, we still offer this course picking I mentioned earlier. And you see also in the light red squares here the discipline-specific qualification. They are symbolized by these squares. And as I said, these should be trained via the scientific fields or the NFDI consortia as add-ons to the data train program. And by now we have more than 40 lecturers involved in this program. They are mainly from internal institutions, but there are also some from external institutions and also from industrial and commercial enterprises. And we think this shows really the need of such a program, because that the industry and the commercial enterprises really offer us their help here. And I should also mention that all these lectures contribute voluntarily to this program. And another good news is that so far we have on average more than 100 participants in our online lectures, in the starter track lectures. And the last slide shows you here the tracks with the content, but I will not go into detail here. I think that would be too much information, but you can have a look on this slide later. We share our slides, and then you can see the content of the single tracks. We thought it might be interesting for you. At the moment, we are in the middle of the starter track, so 8 lectures are completed, and next week we continue with a lecture about the meaningfulness of data. So this is marked by this yellow bar here, this slide. So this leads me to our last slide, and I say thank you from both of us, Frank Oliver and me, for your attention, and many thanks for the opportunity to present data train in the frame of this workshop.
Thank you both. Very happy to end with this presentation. Clearly very successful initiative, and it's quite nice to see that sort of regional alliance behind it, which of course in a different way speaks to the theme that we're seeing throughout all the presentations, which is sort of sustainable integration of this, that these are not isolated initiatives. They do have a context, a bedding, if you will. Just before we move on to the Q&A, I have a very specific question for you in the Q&A. Vincent Gaillard asked, well said, actually noticed that she was surprised by the course picking approach. And she's wondering, how do you make that work in terms of program coherence and sort of diverse baselines? Do you have an answer to that?
So many thanks for this question. So how do you make it work in terms of program? You mean the diverse baselines of in terms of the prior knowledge? Yeah, okay.
Imagine, yeah.
So we really describe, or try to describe as detailed as possible, the prior knowledge the candidates should bring. And as I said, we focus on really the basics of research data management and data science. So mostly we do not have prior knowledge. So some requirements in terms of prior knowledge.
Okay, thank you. With that being said, I'd like to ask all the presenters to turn on their camera, because we'll sort of be moving to the Q&A now. And there are quite a few questions for us to dig into. Just have to see which one I pick first. I think one question that Eva Naktkova has asked in the Q&A, I think, is perhaps a question for Alexander in terms of your views on at what level should the provision of RDM and FAIR data skills training, at what institutional level, which institutional level should be included in sort of developing that?
Well, my standard answer, it depends on the institution. So but it's indeed not so easy, because institutions are extremely diversely organized when it comes to doctoral education. So you maybe find doctoral schools which have a relatively big autonomy even into the institutional structure, so maybe directly linked to the rector, for instance. Others are much more involved into a certain framework. So this makes it relatively difficult to see it. But of course, it's important to connect this really to the more overall institutional strategies we see nowadays, which are increasingly understanding that, and the pandemic made it even much clearer, that the digitalization and the open science is an aspect of a institutional strategy which is dealt also on a higher level. And this means that we need to look at this, but at the same time, often it's also quite technical. And what we have also seen is that it's quite important to really be connected to the ground where the needs are. So including top-down in an institution, this is now our FAIR data training. It's maybe not the best. So we probably an approach which is really listening to the needs, also from the doctoral candidates, from the different disciplines, and connecting it to the broader institutional strategy and the people involved in this may be the best way to mobilize the necessary resources and include it into the work of the institution.
Another question, thank you, Alexander. Another question that I am seeing is a question, I think, for all the speakers. It's Paula Lavanci, who's asking, well, is there a consensus that research data management, FAIR data skills, that these are transferable skills? Because she's speaking to the experience of TU Delft, where it is very specifically within the doctoral education program to highlight the importance of these skills within the research process. Are there any views on that?
Maybe sorry. I didn't raise my hand.
Yes, Frank, please.
Thanks. I would say yes, because it's just starting at the moment. And as we already heard, it's for sure definitely different. If you just look at the Bremen environment, we have institutes that act differently than we have the university. We have within the university different Fachbereiche, the different parts of the university. All of them have different maturity in terms of dealing with the data and how they are doing. But in general, there's a tendency to have this kind of knowledge as a basic knowledge for graduate student, and in a perfect scenario, we would also start to do this even on the undergraduate level and add this to the curriculum. But in Germany, at least, this takes ages. So you cannot just change an undergraduate education program just by demands. You need accreditation and years to change this. So, but therefore, that's also why we start with the doctoral at this point, but we are trying to move into the master. We already provide a master course outside of this or within this, but it's more specific for an international school, and we are moving towards this. So I would say it's really a basic skill that, from my point of view, everybody should at least have a basic knowledge about it.
Thank you. I'm seeing that Helene also has her hand raised.
Yeah, I don't know about the consensus part. I don't think we've had that discussion, at least here in my university, but I think that it's a good question. And I think that it's important to see research data management, FAIR data skills as both. I mean, it's the way we approach it here is that we focus on it as a essential part of doing good research, really to underline that it's useful and also relevant for the PhD candidate wherever he is or she is in the process, and also towards the PhD supervisors who really want to protect the time that PhD candidates, how they spend their time. But also I think it's so one might look at it on two different levels. So by having good research data management, you also develop your transferable skills, meaning communication, project management, work ethics, all these more general terms. I guess perhaps the question is how we should present it to the PhD community, including the supervisors, because we want our PhD candidates to really be good at research data management, but for different reasons, as I said in my presentation. It's both for doing good research, but it's also for preparing them for the future. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh, clearly, it's an interesting answer. Alexander, I'm seeing you have your hand raised as well.
Yes, actually, I mean, Helene actually already said most of the thing I wanted to say, but I mean, there is not a consensus what is a transferable skills training related to research training. But, and this was said, this is really important. Actually, most of the research training researchers get is not through a course or a specific dedicated training, but is in these 3 to 4 years. You work more or less closely with your supervisor and also on your own doing your research. And probably the majority of what you will learn is in this process. So And this is always, of course, much more difficult than providing a training for 3 days. So what is worse, and this has to do with also a certain research culture in the institution, how can we make people aware that they need to deal with, for instance, FAIR data, not only when they sign up for a training, but on actually every day of your research, you deal with data. And here, sensitization, awareness raising shouldn't maybe not be underestimated and can also be an important role. So not only saying we explain you how to do it, but we are also here to raise your attention that data is something you may need to think about when you deal with data, and don't just forget it, because maybe in a year or two it becomes critical for you that you can that you have done now the right thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Frank, I'm also seeing your hand raised.
Yeah, just as an addition, I fully agree. So in theory, the whole data management issue shouldn't be part of an extra lecture. It should be part of your daily work. But our experience is that unfortunately, not all PIs are, let's say, cooperative in this way, because still, and this maybe goes a bit into the one question here, what with the incentive, still the current incentive for most of the PhD students and postdocs is the paper, the classical paper, and not the data set that has been published, not the data management that has been done, which takes significantly amount of time. And we have, unfortunately, the experience that often PIs look more for the paper has been published than the data has been published. And so this is the cultural change that we need to tackle. This is also part of the national research data infrastructure, and that's of the local initiatives to get this awareness and this importance into this process connected to the national environment. And yeah, working on this.
It's a big task. I'm seeing many of our presenters that want to jump in here. Katja, you have your hand raised.
Yes, well, I also want to kind of agree with the other speakers here. It's very much so, as for example, as Frank just describing that if there's a cultural change on how the researchers or what they consider valuable, is it the paper or is it the data? And that is, of course, something that we have been struggling. We do have a quite good participation degree when it comes to, for example, our data management training, but still we are faced quite often with the fact, like, is this really important? What's the point? I mean, yeah, they don't necessarily see it that valuable. And it's going to be difficult to try and to implement data management training throughout, for example, the whole university. And for example, we have mainly been focusing on researchers, but now we are sort of shifting towards doctoral researchers and also the students, because I did mention in my slides that the data management skills they don't necessarily benefit researchers or students when they are moving to doing their PhD. If they kind of go outside the university, I would say that they need data management skills in their, in their lives afterwards, in their working lives. So in that sense, I also see the data management skills definitely as the working life skills. And in that sense, they are very closely or very deeply transferable skills as well.
Mm-hmm. I can only agree also from the perspective of the FAIRsFAIR project, which is, I think, some of the practical tools to help universities implement all of this that we're working towards by the end of this year is, for example, an adoption handbook with model curricula. And that is an adoption handbook that very explicitly focuses on bachelor, master, and doctoral level. We still have to develop precisely the approach within the adoption handbook, but I can already tell you that we've had discussions about, okay, it has to start at a very basic generic level, maybe at the bachelor level, become more specific, more advanced in the master level, and then ultimately at the doctoral level, people going into that then sort of focus that on their own research projects. But even before that bachelor master level, there should already be a very solid basis, because I think most people would agree this is something that's going to become important, not just within academia, but clearly many people will benefit from this in their careers in the coming years. Frank, do you have your hand raised to jump in here?
Okay, just what I forgot also to see how complicated it might be sometime is that we are currently trying to have data policies or guidelines for this for the institutes, and we managed one now at the Alfred Wegener Institute, but it took us 2 years to negotiate this with the scientists. So, and you can negotiate how long is the embargo period until you can publish your data, and when do you release them and whatever. So it can take forever. Now we're trying to get this viral and get it to the other institutes slowly, but it will take another 10 years, I guess. So you see, and this also comes back to one of the questions in there, is they have a financial support. We have to say yes and no. In terms of the national, so the governmental side, they have decided to give financial support for the NFDI as a whole. But as Tanya already mentioned, this is only the back office. We need the front office. We need the people at the locations, at the institutes. And there we have hope that maybe end of this year, we get some money from Bremen. So far, all this what we did was without any financial support. This is not completely true because Tanya is paid by at least half from Bremen, but this was given at this time. But you see, in terms of the 20,000 students and 500 faculty, it is a minor amount that flows at the moment into this, we would say, very important topic. And there's still room for improvement, because money often gives also a bit of how valuable it is. So if they invest at the moment, if you ask a researcher, next research project or data steward, wow, next research project, data steward. Ooh.
Yeah, that's a good comment. And it answers clearly one of the questions we had in the Q&A session. I do want to go to one question, a very short question by Eva Hanatkova, and that has already been mentioned or alluded to in a couple of the answers, is sort of what could be the incentives for doctoral candidates to practice open science practices and invest in research data management skills. I can definitely talk a bit about that because that's one of the focus points in my job, incentives and rewards. But I first want to sort of extend the invitation to the panelists, if they perhaps have any views on that. I know that's been mentioned a couple of times also in the presentations. If anyone wants to jump in, talk about sort of the possible incentives for doctoral candidates to get them sort of engaged in this.
We give you the floor. You say you're an expert. Now we just comment on your expertise at the end.
I would never call myself an expert. No, but I have worked on this a little bit. No, I think what I can say from the work that the European University Association has been doing on academic career assessment is that this is a really fundamental question. The incentive and reward structure that exists in a specific institution, in a specific national or regional system is going to be absolutely key in, I think, translating not just FAIR data and research data management skills, but just open sciences general into sort of the daily lives of researchers. That's how it sort of will become sort of visible for, I think, the majority of people. We know from surveys that the EUA has done in the past and that the EUA will be publishing pretty soon as well, is that right now it is a difficult question. Because if we ask universities right now in terms of, okay, what types of incentives for open science do you provide right now for individual careers, very often, if it exists, that is limited then to the output. Again, it's sort of open science, open access publications. That is sort of where universities have the capacity and are capable and have the knowledge to say, okay, this we can integrate in our incentive and reward structure. But as we all know, open science is obviously, it's about the entire research process, about opening up the entire process. We know from surveys that there are very few incentives available across Europe in universities right now for opening up the entire research process. And that is something to be looked at, because it's not as simple to then say, okay, well, we should implement those. The question is, well, what would those incentives look like? It's an issue of just capacity. The assessment system just doesn't have the capacity to, I think, in an accurate way, try to incentivize and reward that right now. That is something clearly that a lot of national systems and individual institutions are taking initiatives on. But it is something that is in the background of the discussion we're having today, that should also start evolving, and perhaps start evolving very quickly to make RDM and fair data skills sort of a much broader element of doctoral education, doctoral research, research in general. Those are sort of my 2 cents on that. And it's also to announce that the EUA will very soon, I think even before summer, come out with a new survey report that deals with exactly these issues. Pedro, can I for a minute ask you, is it possible for us to give attendees speaking rights?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
So the idea is that if they want to speak, they just need to ask for that, raise the hand, and we give them permissions.
Yeah. If that is possible, would it be possible for you to give Vincent Gaillard from EUA speaking rights as an attendee? Because there's a question from Ellen Leenaerts in the Q&A, which is also, of course, for the panelists themselves here, but it is about sort of the role that the European Open Science Cloud might play in this discussion.
Yes, could you repeat? So Rita can give permissions right now, and she also can give me permissions to give permissions if it's possible. So can you mention again the name in order to Rita be aware of?
It's Vincent Gaillard, who's raised their hand.
Yes, okay.
We'll have to bear with the technicalities for just a minute.
Yes, maybe we can move to another question, and I will solve that with Rita.
Mm-hmm. Okay. There's another question then from Rina in the Q&A, which is, are FAIR and data management taken into account in the quality assurance procedures in your institutions? I think this is a question just to all the panelists. Is this part of sort of the QA procedures in your institution? Or is that rather via the European Higher Education Area Bologna process with its student approach to doctoral training? I think the question there really is sort of, if you talk about FAIR and data management at a really fundamental level, how does an institution approach this? Is this sort of part of, researchers and then the QA processes behind that, or not?
Maybe I can briefly just comment from my experience, which is not representative, definitely, but it completely depends at the moment on the institution, completely depends on the university, even it depends on the section in the university, and depends finally on the PI. So it's not, as I said, we are trying to work on general data policy or how to deal with data and guidelines and directives on this. But what is at the moment available is very, very general. So yeah, you have to take care about your data. Okay. But there's no specific implementation on this. And this negotiation, I just follow one because for a subgroup, not for the whole university, just for a small institute in the university. And already this causes, frictions on that. So I can say not yet implemented on a general level, but Tanya has most probably more insights than I have.
Yeah, I could add, and this is something I learned during the status quo and demand assessment, that it's really, as you said, Frank Oliver, depends on the institutions, and mostly it's really on the working group level, but there are some institutions, for example, the ones which deal with health data, then it's really included in the QA, and they have their strict rules they need to follow, and they have a lot of data stewards because it's needed for their research, because they deal with personal data, and there's the need to yeah, handle that properly.
Thank you. I see that Vinciane has speaking rights. So I think technically we're ready then to sort of delve into the question of, okay, the European Open Science Cloud is coming into existence. What role would that play in this discussion, Vinciane?
Yeah, I'm here. Good morning, all. Well, thank you very much for raising this question, and I understand that this is a question from someone who is very knowledgeable, because you are working in a task force from the EOSC Association. The thing that I wanted to mention in this context is a reference that was presented in one of the presentations. It's the EOSC Working Group Skills and Training report, where we had a few recommendations as to how to increase, to develop the next generation of FAIR and open science professionals. So this, of course, is related to doctoral education, but not only to doctoral education. That was one priority area. A second one was in terms of enhancing digital skills for FAIR and open science in Europe. For third priority area was about a trusted and long-lasting federated knowledge hub for training materials and related tools. And the fourth one related to influencing national open science policy for skills, with something that would be considered like a strategic leadership program, training program. The common denominator of all those priority areas and the related recommendations that came out of the work from this expert group is something that has been addressed here today. It's the diversity, and sometimes like it's the huge diversity and the lack of alignment and coordination. I think that lack of coordination is more of the keyword of what is existing already across Europe, and that can be at the level of trainings, at the level of the available resources, at the level of the support resources, material bits to support staff. And so really the idea was to highlight the diversity. And again, it's like diversity is good. I think that in Europe, we all agree that diversity is good. It's good, it's an asset, as long as there is some coordination and alignment in order not to duplicate any effort, and in order not to miss any spots. So this is the problem where it's too diverse and not coordinated. So that would be a kind of a cross-cutting recommendation from that group. And regarding your specific question, which I think was related to upskilling countries to engage with EOSC, and how to or how can the EOSC Association and the task force in particular, how can they help achieving open science and fair data in the research practice? So I think that in that specific aspect, the last set of recommendations from that expert group, working group, relate to those to the pan-European level, and it's about the articulation between the European centralized or federated level via EOSC and individual and national regional initiatives. And so the idea would be to have a skills and training leadership program at national level. So that would be strategic leaders who would make the link and the connection between their context and the European context. And yeah, I think that would be the main part. As a final note, what I would like to say is that basically EUA is very interested in all this, as you have seen, but of course, our focus and our angle will always be at the level of higher education institutions and not so much at the government or regional, like national government, regional government level. So this is where we have some contacts at the national level via the national rectors conferences. We have 33 of them as members of EUA, but that would be our entry point to the national context. And I hope that is that helps solving not your problem, but addressing your question.
Thank you so much, Vincian. If any of the panelists feel like they want to sort of provide their views as well on the European Open Science Cloud in general, so what role that can play, otherwise we'll move on. Okay, there's one last question, which is actually great because we're sort of slowly getting to the end of this event. But there is one last question from Irena, addressed to Alexander. Do you think FAIR data and data management skills should be training should be part of research integrity training, or maybe it should be better a separate course? What would be your advice for doctoral schools? I have a hunch you might answer, it depends on the context.
Wow, so after your prophetic skills, I don't know if this was part of your doctoral training, but indeed, it depends. But I mean, let's change it. I can say both. So just to have another, yes. I mean, we speak about a huge area actually here, which touches research ethics and integrity. However, as I understand, and I'm not an expert in this, but only seeing FAIR data as element of research ethics and integrity may be also problematic, because it's also a skill, as it was done previously, which you will need all your life. And there are definitely, I mean, it's not only, you don't not do FAIR data only to avoid research misconduct. It increases the quality of research. It has a lot of important effects. So it's more important maybe to identify the dimensions of FAIR data, to look maybe also on a more pragmatic level. So if we have a research ethics and integrity training, and if there is the possibility to address their FAIR data, it would be a shame not to do it, because it's important, but it's also an opportunity. But at the same time, look on one hand what's going on. So the question of data skills is also becoming more important. So also look if the opportunity is there, and ideally we would have the different levels. So as it was also mentioned before, it's not about sensitizing research and say, yes, FAIR data is important, now deal it with yourself. I mean, this is exactly the idea what doctoral education is trying to broaden by saying, yes, it's part of you, but we have now a structure which can give additional training, and it's a shared responsibility. So the institution can provide additional training in different contexts, in research ethics and integrity, in data training. It can sensitize that it's becoming part of daily practice in the different research area, and then providing a forum where people can also discuss where things are going and what the different needs are. I can imagine we still need to understand much better what the needs are in different level of careers, in different disciplines, and like the whole package would probably be the best approach.
I think that's a great answer. It's about looking at the whole package. It's about, okay, even if there are separate courses, then why not also include it in sort of more cross-cutting courses? I think we're through all the Q&A questions. I want to sort of open the floor one last time to our speakers, if there's any final comments from their sides. I think we've had a great discussion already. If there's anything else for the moment, no, then I think it's up to me to thank all of you. Thank you for your presentations. Thank you also for bearing with us as we're sort of working through all the questions from the audience. Thank you for the discussion. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Pedro now to close the workshop.
Yeah, thank you, Bert, and thank you all the speakers for this great morning. We are at the end of this first workshop on this series of workshops of FAIRsFAIR in FAIR competencies in universities. So be aware of this schedule. So we will come up. We already have the dates for October. We don't have the final day for September, but we will for sure present it soon. So we will disseminate it. You can find the information also in the FAIRsFAIR website. So count with by the end of September with this second workshop, and be aware also of all the materials that are being produced in FAIRsFAIR on this specific work package related with FAIR data science curriculum and professionalization. There are already some things that we made publicly available from some reports, the competence framework, but also we are producing this adoption handbook and then the good practices report, which I think they will be a benefit for this community. And count also with these workshops. I think it will be interesting. The next one is focused on the academic curriculum, but that also more targeting teachers in universities. So be aware of that. And if possible, contribute to the FAIR data competencies in university discussion in the FAIR data forum. So it will be really a benefit where you can share your use cases, good practices. It will be really good to hear from you also in this parallel conversation in the FAIR data forum. So many thanks all. So we just keep the channel open for 1 or 2 minutes, just if you want to copy some links or to record the chat. But many thanks, and see you in one of the coming meetings. Bye bye. Thank you very much, Tanya. Yes, I think we can close, Rita. Bye-bye.